Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We're here. It's November 7th, and we are live streaming on YouTube on my YouTube page, youtube.com/Vin Armani. We're also live streaming on Facebook. It's on Activist Post Facebook. Activist Post is our content partner. You can reach them at facebook.com/Activist Post. If you have not liked them on Facebook or followed them on Twitter, they are at Activist Post. You're really missing out. The show wouldn't be possible without them. They have some of the best and most comprehensive news breaking through the propaganda engine that is the state of the states that we are living in. So we're one day away from the election. Our last episode, we covered quite a bit of election stuff and the reasons why you should not be voting. If you have not checked that out, please go and check that out. You can see either on activistpost.com or youtube.com/Vin Armani. You can go back and check out the archives. Also, podcasts available on Stitcher and iTunes. I want to thank everybody that's been tuning in so far, and I want to thank our previous guest from last week, Peter Kallman. I've gotten so many great reviews and so much great feedback. We're definitely going to have him back. Today, I'm super excited because we have a regular contributor to Activist Post among many other media outlets, very well-respected independent journalist, certainly up and coming, an author, a musician. Most recently has done some fantastic reporting from the front lines of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests in North Dakota, just outside the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. Derrick Broze is our guest today. We're going to have him on in the second hour. We really have some great content today. I want to introduce, I guess since we're kind of doing something about the Dakotas today, I guess if I was Butch Cassidy, he'd be like my Sundance Kid. Christian Reyes.
Thank you very much, Vin. Thank you.
Good morning, man.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Amazing.
I'm really excited for the show today. You know, it's great. People, you know, you develop as you're doing these sorts of things. You sort of develop a routine as you move along on how you develop the show. We spend, although it's a live show, and maybe because it's a live show, we have to spend a lot of time in pre-production.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we have the help of the people at Activist Post to really curate our news and help us out. But one of the things, and I just want to say, man, on camera, live, so that everybody knows, I want to just reiterate how much I appreciate you being a part of this process.
Thank you very much. And it goes the same for me, too. I'm really, really, really honored to be on here. And it's opening my mind a lot. So
it's great, you know, when we're preparing the show, you and I get a chance to talk for hours at a time as we sort of go through how we're going to present the show and whatnot, and that feedback and that dialogue, I think, is really going to contribute to this thing being excellent. So you know what we have in store for today. I know what we have in store. This particular issue that we're going to talk about with Derrick Broze is, I find absolutely fascinating. I think that it really goes to the core of all of the things that we as libertarians or voluntarists, anarchists, agorists, it's got every single piece of all of the big issues that we deal with when we're talking about the state or not having the state. When people ask about, well, how will things get done in a stateless society? How will we settle disputes? All of these things. And so not only am I super excited to have him here because he's been up on the front lines of this whole thing in the Dakotas, but he's also someone who is, you know, as an author, he's written about, you know, anarchist philosophy, and he's a practicing agorist, and I mean, they're doing some fantastic stuff in Houston. I hope that we get a chance to talk about that. So I'm super excited to have somebody who can talk about it from that standpoint. So I think we got a really great dialogue.
It's really cool.
But with tomorrow being the election, there's so much that's still going on and still developing. I think we'll wait until next week to really talk about the precise things and specific things about the election. But I think what we do have today is a show that I think has turned out to be not about what to think. And this is something that we talked a lot about yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Not about what to think, but trying to get at how to think.
Yeah.
When we started the show, I said the only thing that we wanted to do with the show is to make people more free by watching it or by listening to it. And that part of that freedom is the freedom to make up your own mind. But you can't make up your own mind when you don't even have a glimpse into your own mind.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
It's gnarly shit.
And so I think today we've got an opportunity to talk about how to think.
Right. Yep.
As opposed to what to think. And we're going to walk through a process today that I think is going to be fun. It's going to, I think, blow some people's minds, because even as I walked down it myself, my mind was blown.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
And so I think what I would like to start with is, in our community, there seems to be this jump. And I mean, I saw it on some of the Facebook comments of the last show that somebody had seen, I guess because in our intro, there's a little clip of there's like a Masonic thing where they're walking, and then there's Obama, and then there's a Masonic thing. And there were 2 comments that I saw, and there may have been more, of somebody going, "Oh, look, even alternative media is controlled by the Illuminati, controlled by Illuminati." Now, first off, what I'm going to tell you is I specifically picked 100 clips off YouTube and sent them over to our buddy, who's our drinking buddy, who edited it down, who is, I assure you, not a member of the Illuminati. I know, because I've been in fights with strip club security with him, okay, and blitz drunk. But he's great at putting together little things like that, and he's done it for us for vodkas and other things. So he put it together. I assure you, he is not Illuminati. But it's funny that people are so quick to, and thanks to people like Mark Dice and David Icke, that it's like, everything's got to be the Illuminati. It's got to be the Illuminati in control. And I think that we may be able to shed some light. Like Kanye West said, people talk about Illuminati, what the fuck that mean, right? So what the fuck it means is, Illuminati means enlightened, illuminated, enlightened, as opposed to being in the dark. Right? And if you're talking about the allegory of the cave in Plato's Republic, even Plato was talking about some people are in the dark, they're chained to a wall, and they're watching, shapes flicker across. But then there's people holding things in front of a fire, and it's when you unchain yourself and you walk into the light that you see. Right?
And it could be understanding that light.
And so I think, if anything, I'd like to use these next 2 hours and the shows that we have in the future to do some enlightenment.
Yeah.
And this first story that we have, I think, goes straight to people seeing Illuminati and everything, and how it can be a distraction. And it's this spirit cooking thing. So if you're not aware of this, there was a WikiLeaks email that was sent to John Podesta, who's the head of Hillary Clinton's campaign, sent actually to his brother, from this artist, Marina Abramovich, who you can see some of her art up there. She was inviting them to a spirit cooking dinner. And when people went and looked, and if you just see those 2 pictures right there, then it obviously, you're like, okay, that's really weird. She's talking about cut your hand, eat the pain, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, Marina wants to have us over for dinner. So immediately, everybody was like, it's Illuminati, they're blood drinking, Satanists, this proves with Clinton. What's interesting, Christian, is that you had been saying, and you pointed this out when we first started talking about some of this Hillary Clinton stuff, you've been saying time and time again, it's a distraction. It's a distraction. It's a distraction. Mm-hmm. Now, you're an artist. That's how we met, is through your art.
Right.
And although I'm a shitty artist graphically, I love art. I collect art. Until recently, I owned an art gallery in downtown. So let's let's do a little illumination, a little enlightenment. So
Okay.
you saw the finished product. Let's take a look at the creation of that product because we can see right here on YouTube. Let's see if she's a blood drinking Satanist. Here we go. Marina Abramovich, Spirit Cooking, 1997. All right. We can narrate this. What we're seeing is here's Marina in a pair of sweatpants, some glasses, and a t-shirt, painting with her little assistant on these walls.
It's really weird.
It's very strange, but here's the thing, man. It's, I have been around contemporary art, and if you've been around contemporary art, this is not even weird. Like,
Right.
This is not weird. I mean, dead animals are a normal part of contemporary art. Weird substances.
It's the shock factor.
I'm gonna be creative and I'm gonna do this in a weird way. And the thing is, rich people pay for this. You know what I mean? The people who are creative. I don't know. Did you see where it said mix breast milk with sperm milk? That was actually on the mix breast milk with sperm milk. I've never ever heard of sperm milk. Have you heard of sperm milk before? It sounds fucking disgusting. So, okay, that's her creating back in 1997. Let's see another. This is a more recent, so you can see what her recent work looks
Everybody's moving. I don't want everybody to sit down.
And we'll see if she's a Satanist or just a weirdo.
No, people are not sitting. I want to sit.
Okay. So,
Okay. Can you clap?
okay, so it's silent, but
Super strange.
what we are seeing here is this woman, just maybe a chest up shot. Her face is painted with some weird, like, they look like, I don't know, eyeballs. She almost looks like a character out of Star Trek.
Yeah, it's
Right? She's like, her face is painted, she probably could tell you exactly what they were. I have no idea. She's got some, like, kind of like stones or something around where her eyebrows would be. Her eyes are closed and she's completely silent. She's just breathing. Completely silent. This is high art, bro. This is high art. Absolutely doing nothing, just standing there. Her eyes open.
Look in the mirror for as long as necessary that your face disappear. Please don't eat the light.
wow.
Christian, don't eat the light. Don't eat the light. Dude, she's
Yeah,
a Satanist. She's a Satan. You said you kind of saw what she was doing. You got this art because I don't get it. I don't get a lot of performance art. I think it's very boring. But you saw what she was doing here?
Yeah, I really, really, really thought about this one deeply. And there's a lot going on there. And I'm going to get to just one quote that she's using a technology.
Okay.
And that technology is a technology of the mind. It's a technology of, and first let me say this. This is a quote from Nassim Haramein.
Okay.
And he says, anything considered spiritual or metaphysical is generally just physics that we do not understand.
Oh, that's interesting.
So right there, what she's doing is a consciousness shift.
Okay.
And she's really playing on fear. So what if you go in the bathroom and you look at the mirror,
Yes.
you will start to see your face blank out,
Really?
And so you have to really pay attention to what she said after that. So she's really, the people that are going to go do that are going to say, oh, it's like a magic trick, right?
Right.
So if you understand the principle of the consciousness, if you understand that, and at first I was a little spooked out by it. Don't get me wrong. I was like, whoa, there's something really, really weird with this chick. But she is using a technology of the mind.
Well, it's definitely, I know that one of the things that she's doing in there is like a state change, right? So when you have an audience, teachers use this, school teachers use this all the time, right? You have like a kind of a rowdy class and the teacher just stands at the front and says nothing,
Yep.
right? Just stands there.
Yeah.
And slowly you see everybody, or you could do this, it's a public speaking technique.
Yep.
You just stop, right? And you change people's state of mind, and then you do something. It's interesting that you said the fear, because I found this. So listen to this. This is from wearechange.org. It says, Abramovich is known for her often gory art that confronts pain and ritual. Her first performance involved repeatedly stabbing herself in her hands. The next performance featured her throwing her nails, toenails, and hair into a flaming 5-point star, which she eventually jumped inside of, causing her to lose consciousness. During the next, she ingested a medication to treat people who were catatonic, which caused violent muscle spasms. She's a bit of a masochist.
Wow.
So perhaps most famously, in 1974, Abramovich placed 72 objects on a table, including a rose, a feather, honey, a whip, olive oil, scissors, a scalpel, and a gun and a single bullet. Alongside the items was a sign informing the audience that the items could be used on her in any way they chose. For 6 hours, she remained at the mercy of the audience, allowing them to do as they pleased. During that time, she was stripped, cut, and one audience member even held the gun to her head. What I learned was that if you leave it up to the audience, they can kill you. I felt really violated. They cut up my clothes, stuck rose thorns in my stomach. One person aimed the gun at my head and another took it away. It created an aggressive atmosphere. After exactly 6 hours, as planned, I stood up and walked toward the audience. Everyone ran away to escape an actual confrontation, she later said of the performance. What I find so interesting about this is that her whole art form is getting a rise out of people.
Mm-hmm.
And even years later, 1997 was the spirit cooking thing. It shows up in WikiLeaks and it gets a rise out of the world. That's pretty effective art, man. If art is to make you take it, if her art, the whole thing is to make you take notice and pay attention, I mean, that's pretty effective. I mean, it's
definitely effective. And she's using, her art is dealing with feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's what she's doing. She's playing off of feelings, and feelings it's actually a control mechanism, but it's also it's the way that we communicate with the universe. So
interesting.
It can get really, really deep and really powerful to the point where it can be like what everybody says with the Illuminati and stuff like that. It can be disguised as that, you know what I mean? So it's really
well.
Here's
the question. Before I'm so not a conspiracy theorist guy, because the things that I know is that there are real conspiracies going on, right? Like there are people really trying to control a narrative. Now, here is my question to you. Do you think that this woman is some sort of a blood-drinking Satanist, or do you think that this woman is an artist who has studied a lot of psychology?
It could be either one, and I would be interested to dive a little bit deeper and to figure it out. I would say she's definitely using dark occult understanding principles and stuff like that.
I'm going to disagree. I'm going to disagree 100%, dude. Here's the reason why. And I think as we look through this, that I do not think that real evil and real control manifests like that. Like, I don't think that real evil and someone who really wants to control you and someone who really wants to make you do something, they don't appear as something that is repulsive, that you push away from. They appear as something that is attractive. That's always the whole thing. They don't paint in blood and shit and semen because that disgusts people. You can't if you disgust people, you can't convince them to do something. Right? And so I think that the real trick, and let's see what real control looks like, because we have a story of real control. And you may be hearing in the background, we have some neighbors who have decided that they're going to run a generator to move some heavy equipment. So hopefully that's not too loud. The Paris climate deal. became international law this week. So from the Associated Press, the Paris Agreement to combat climate change becomes international law on Friday, November 4th. A landmark demonstrating that countries are serious about tackling global warming amid growing fears that the world is becoming hotter faster than scientists expected. So far, 96 countries, accounting for just over 2/3 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, have formally joined the accord, which seeks to limit global warming to 2 degrees Celsius. While the Paris Agreement is legally binding, the emissions reductions that each country has committed to are not. So, Christian, this is a really interesting story. Barack Obama signed this Paris Agreement as he said that it's merely an executive agreement and not a treaty, which I think is against the Constitution. And we're dealing with a treaty today, and the idea of treaties with this Dakota Access Pipeline, because that's one of the things that the Sioux tribe is dealing with. Now, treaties have to be ratified by Congress, by the Constitution. What's interesting about this agreement, what this agreement says, and it's funny because I really had to dig into the media. There's a lot of stories about this, but I really had to dig in to find out what the fuck does this thing even say? Everybody's celebrating it. They did all these things. Pass the Paris, blah, blah. Climate change, we got to stop climate change. Pass this thing. Basically what it says is that it gives every country a specific sort of quota, a maximum quota that they can, of CO2 emissions, of carbon dioxide that they can have. Now, the problem with this is that carbon dioxide is emitted by industrial processes, particularly cars that are not as efficient, cars and trucks that are not as efficient, and the less efficient the coal plant or the petroleum plant is, the more carbon dioxide it's going to emit. Now, the issue in this case is, for the developed countries, this is not necessarily a big deal. First, the developed countries have a big quota. And second, the developed countries are already starting to move into renewables, right? In the US, it's actually an option. Where this gets difficult is the developed nations. That in order for, the US, the UK, Russia, Canada, all of Europe had their time in their development where they had coal-fired power plants, where they had dirty, England used to be, the skies used to be completely gray with soot, right? And that was known, that there was just soot on everything. Places like New York and Boston had these issues too. In the history of the U.S., if you look at the environmental damage that was done turning the U.S. into the U.S., from the Dust Bowl to poisoning the Great Lakes to poisoning rivers, this was a part of the industrialization process. There were no such accords at the time. And what's interesting is, here you have these developed countries. You're asking them to get from point A to point B, from less developed to developed, but yet you're denying them the pathway that the other developed countries had. And as a business owner, and as somebody who has, I've had venues, and I've managed music venues, I've been associated with nightlife. It's interesting when you see the advantage that, say, if we're talking about Las Vegas, that, say, a bar or a restaurant that opened 25 years ago has over a bar or restaurant that opens now, simply because of they didn't have the regulations. They were able to move cheaper. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So for me, it's one of these things, when I see these protests, I look at the people who were there, I do not see people in these developing nations who are poor where what's going to lift them out of poverty, industrialization, modernization, the things that lifted the developed nations out of poverty and gave their people the standard of living that they have. I do not see these people asking for this.
Yeah.
But I see it being enforced upon them.
It's forced, yeah. And this was passed just like all the other agreements. It was kind of passed silently, right? Like,
Well, I mean, in terms of being approved by the U.S., it wasn't that it was even silent. It's just President Obama said, yeah, I'll sign it. I'm going to sign it. It's not even, there was no debate about it. There was no nothing.
wow.
And this is one of the things that where one of the biggest arguments when I talk about a stateless society with people, their arguments about, well, if you don't like the situation as it is, you're able to vote. We have a constitutional republic. You can just vote the person in that you want, but it's like, this was unilaterally signed by the president. This is international law. It was signed by, I'm trying to look at how many countries, 96 countries.
Whoa.
96 countries agreeing to this, and the American people had no vote.
No idea.
An outgoing lame duck president who is no longer accountable to the voters because he served his 2 terms, signed it as an executive order, and you want to tell me that I am able to vote and have political action about what I want to see happen in the world. It's just not there.
No, it's insanity.
It's just not there. And the climate, it's one of those things where, of course, everybody's like, yeah, do I want the world to be destroyed?
No.
Do I want the climate destroyed? No. Is there anybody out there asking the climate to be destroyed? No. No. Absolutely not. I want clean air and I want clean water for everyone. But you know what? If you're living in a place with clean air and clean water, but you're starving, or there's no chance for social mobility, you don't have the same sorts of opportunities for education, opportunities for, in terms of technology, opportunities to communicate with the world. Like, who cares if the air is clean? Like, there's got to be some sort of a balance there.
Yeah,
I think that
I agree with
finding
that, yeah.
the balance is important, and only seeing one side of it. I think it's one of those things where it's very easy for some person who is, say under the age of 40 in this country, or even under the age of 60, really, in this country, and we have a lack of an understanding of history. It's very easy for people of a certain age in this country to say, yeah, we need to now clean everything up. Everything needs to be cleaned up. Like the climate is the most important thing when they have air conditioning in their home, when they have 2 cars in the garage, when they have a grocery store 2 blocks away that's more full of food. Like, where the idea that we have homeless people with an obesity problem.
Yeah.
Like,
That's a gnarly thought.
obesity is a symptom of poverty in America. Think about how that's turned on its head. Obesity. It used to be if you were starving, if you're starving in India, you're skinny as a fucking rail.
Yep.
If you're starving in any of the developing nations of the world, you are bone thin. Because if you're poor, I should say, part of being poor for the whole history of being impoverished for the whole history of humanity has been not enough food. We have so much food that one of the symptoms of being poor is obesity. It's turned on its head, so it's very easy for us. It's very easy for us to take up these causes when there's no ramifications for us. Personally. This is I really hope that this generator next door is not messing with everybody, but they've got some hydraulic things going on. So we also had another thing happen. This is interesting. This one, you asked about being passed in secret. This one was passed pretty much in secret. And it's an executive order, another executive order from Obama, advancing the global health security agenda to achieve a world safe and secure from infectious disease threats. That was the title of it. This kind of slipped through, and it was sent to me by a friend of mine who's heavily involved in sort of vaccine rights. And so here it is. It was signed quietly by Obama on Friday, November 4th, which is, to me, the Friday before an election is a little bit, secret signing on the Friday before a huge election, so it'll definitely get buried, it definitely brings some questions to mind. So it says, it is the policy of the United States to advance the global health security agenda, which is a multifaceted, multi-country initiative intended to accelerate partner countries' measurable capabilities to achieve specific targets to prevent, detect, and respond to infectious disease threats, whether naturally occurring, deliberate, or accidental. I had to really look into this, and thankfully the people at Activist Post did a lot of digging on this. Basically what it is, it's working with the CDC, the WHO, actually even Interpol, all of these. But what it comes down to is this is the GHSA immunization agenda. Now, people on the anti-vaccine side, or what I like to call the self-ownership side, the no mandatory vaccine side,
Right, yeah.
have been arguing that there is a creeping movement to mandatorily inject people with things that they may or may not want to be injected with, vaccines primarily. But once it's a vaccine, it could really be any medication once you have the sort of the precedent to do it. Here's the GHSA immunization agenda that Obama signed this, saying all of these agencies need to follow this. It said participating countries must have a functioning national vaccine delivery system with nationwide reach, effective distributions, access for marginalized populations, adequate cold chain, and ongoing quality control. Okay, you've got a vaccine process. But it says at least 90% coverage of the country's 15-month-old population, that's a year and 3 months, with at least one dose of measles-containing vaccine. So here, the measles-containing vaccine is MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella. So this is mandating 90% coverage by 1 year and 3 months, 15 months, which there has been, the movie Vaxxed is actually about MMR vaccine. And one of the things that it says is before 2 years old, the danger level of these vaccines, as the ones that were studied at the time, they've got a new one, actually go up in terms of the bad things that can happen, seizures, autism, whatever. This was studied. Now, there's still some controversy about whether this is true, whether it's not, but I think this gets to the core of and why this is important to me. And it also flows right into our interview, which is coming up in a while. Derrick Broze going to be talking about the Dakota Access Pipeline. So why this is important to me. Christian, why don't you go ahead and see if you can't get him up soon, or at least see if he's ready. Jump on back. Thank you, sir. Why this is important for libertarians, and why this goes to the idea of how to think in terms of becoming more free. There's a single concept that changed my life once I understood it. It's the concept that made me, I guess, a libertarian. It's the concept that led me toward anarchism. Now I call myself a voluntarist, toward agorism. It's the concept that informs my life at the core and informs my decisions. And from that, everything flows. And the concept is the concept of self-ownership. And we're going to talk about how that relates to all of the issues that we've talked about today, and particularly this issue of the protests at the Dakota Access Pipeline. The idea of self-ownership is that every human being owns themselves. It's the basis of the ideas in the Declaration of Independence. It's the basis of the ideas that are enshrined in the Constitution. It's the basis of human rights. That it's the reason why slavery is illegal. The idea that one human being cannot own another human being. We have self-ownership. We own our bodies. And because we own our bodies, we own our minds. And because we own our minds and the work that is done there, and our bodies and what our bodies do, then we own our labor. Flowing from that comes property. So you have, and this is the philosophy of the Enlightenment. Draws right back into Illuminati, illuminated, enlightened. This is the philosophy that was the basis of the Enlightenment, a time and an era when the United States was founded. It was founded on Enlightenment ideals. So if you want to know the basis of what the Illuminati is, it's this. Who owns you? Self-ownership. You own your body. Therefore, and you own it 100%, and I own my body, and Christian owns his body, and you out there, you own yourself 100%, not 90%, not 50%, 100%. You own yourself, you're responsible for yourself, you're responsible for your actions, and you own your labor. You own the work that you do. And in economics, going back to, as last week we were talking about Austrian economics, why it's so powerful is, I own 100% of my labor, and yet in the world are natural resources. These are things provided to us by nature, and these are the things that we're talking about protecting with the climate change things, with Dakota Access Pipeline, that the idea is that there are these things given by nature, and these are natural resources. Why are natural resources important? The reason they're important is that they're there, they're owned by no one. So let's say a tree in a forest that no one has claim to, a pristine forest. And a person goes and with their labor, they cut down that tree and they turn it into a series of boards. Those boards, because natural resources plus the labor of a human being, he owns his labor. Now he owns those boards. It's his private property. And he can do as he wants. He can build a house. He can sell them. And someone can trade their private property. Maybe they went down to the river and they caught some fish. Another natural resource. Or they went into the mountains and they mined some gold. Another natural resource. And people exchanging property peacefully is respecting the idea of self-ownership. Respecting the rights of private property. That's why it's life, liberty, and property. And these are enshrined even in our Bill of Rights. The First Amendment, you've got speech and assembly and religion, but Amendments 2, 3, and 4 are all about property. 2 is about you can own guns, the right to keep and bear arms, to keep them. Number 3 is that the state can't stick soldiers in your home. It's about the sanctity of your home, of your private property. And number 4 is about the state can't just come into your house or your property without a warrant. You have the right to be secure in your articles, in your papers. The right to privacy. Privacy is all about private property. It says it right there, privacy. And so it's this single issue of self-ownership, that it's not about making vaccines mandatory, mandating them. And whether that's the right thing or the wrong thing to do is not about some responsibility to keep other people healthy, that the state has a responsibility to keep people healthy. Because that responsibility can't override my self-ownership and your self-ownership. If I don't agree to something being put in my body, I mean, you can't get much more invasive than that. That doesn't violate the self-ownership principle much. You can't get much more than that. Rape is a crime. And the idea behind that is that you are touching and or penetrating someone's body. So this is the same thing. The reason why rape is a crime is because of self-ownership. It doesn't actually matter what's in the vaccine. It doesn't matter. Because once you get to the point where you have accepted that the state has some percentage of ownership on your actual physical body, enough that they can grab you, arrest you, which is in this, and put something in your body against your will, it's done. Respect for self-ownership or respect for private property. Those are the keys. Christian, do we have Derrick? I'd love to go to him maybe a little early if we could.
He hasn't responded yet, but I do want to add to what you were saying.
Okay, please.
So with the spirit cooking thing and all that stuff, also the thing that we own, and we often overlook it because it's such a basic principle, is perspective. We own our perspective. So with that spirit, like with that thing, I actually went through a little bit of fear.
Sure.
And I also came to understanding that I own my perspective. And the only way to really defeat that is not by resisting. It's not resistance.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
resistance, you can think of it like you go to the gym and work out, you resist, right? You build your muscles.
Absolutely.
So it's going to
Sure.
expand.
Sure.
It's not the resistance that's going to take something down or starve it. What you need to do is move the energy and move the attention.
I like that. And that's, I think, that's an interesting, Bruce Lee said, be like water,
Yeah.
right? Be like water, flow around it. I've found in my own life, I mean, I'm a big believer in the path of least resistance, that it really is about looking at, and the perspective should be, I have a great many options. And that the number of options that I have is limited only by my imagination.
Yeah. Yep.
And only by my willingness to either continue to look for solutions or to stop in terms of looking for solutions. And that one of the things that informs me is when I know when it's a right path, because it feels like it's moving so smooth.
Yeah.
That the right decision is almost like I'm not even having to put in any effort. That it's just moving. That other people are coming to me and almost pulling me along, right? That I'm not having to fight against anything.
You become magnetic.
You become magnetic. Kind of law of attraction there, right?
Yeah,
I like
definitely.
it. Do we? So what do we got? Do we have him?
Yeah, he's ready. I'm going to get him on right now.
He's ready. Okay, so why don't you go ahead, bring him on? We will go to break. Why don't we just go to a quick break, and then we will come back with Derrick Broze. Are we muted? Audio here. Derrick, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
we are not hearing him. He's coming
Nope.
in,
Oh,
but
shit.
there he goes. Okay, I think do we have him?
You got me?
Are you there? Yes. Is everything sounding okay on your end, or are you getting a little
Sound
echo? Sounds good?
Sounds good to me. Yep.
Okay, excellent. So I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for coming. I don't know if you've been listening to the show, but we've had some crazy did we lose him? We lost him? Okay. Well, we will get him back. Sorry about that. Let's see.
No idea.
Okay, let's see.
I'm
Go ahead
here.
and full
Sorry.
screen him, Christian. Please don't take him off again, bro. Don't hang up on him. All right, so I want to welcome to the show Derrick Broze, a independent journalist, author, musician, real activist, agorist, or agorist, as the case may be, has contributed to Activist Post quite a bit, as well as a number of AntiMedia, Mint Press, was recently on RT, founder of the Conscious Resistance Network. Derrick Broze, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So what I wanted to talk about today, this absolutely fascinating issue, you're one of the few respected independent journalists who has been out there, who has gotten the scoop, who has talked to the people. You're one of the few, I gotta say, with this Dakota Access Pipeline, you're one of the few people. I've seen some people there reporting and throwing up some small things about, the protesters getting attacked and whatnot. What I've rarely seen and what I've really liked that you've done is that you've actually talked to the people, that you've taken some time and spoken with the people who are actually there on the front lines, which is something that is completely missing. For the people who do not know much about this story, I've been interested, so I've done a whole lot of research, and I can't wait to talk with you about it. Can you just inform people how you decided to sort of get involved with the movement that's happening in Dakota, and tell people about what's going on out at Standing Rock with the Dakota Access Pipeline?
Sure. Thank you for having me on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to communicate about this very important issue. So I originally became involved or interested basically because I care about this planet. It's pretty much as simple as that. I care about what happens to the life on this planet, not just human life, but all life. Also, as somebody that has Native ancestry, part of my family is Seminole, and the other part of my family is native to Texas since before colonization. And so from all those different standpoints, environmental, historical, ancestral, and as a journalist, the topic was intriguing to me and something that I wanted to cover. Basically, what has been going on since April of this past year, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they gave fast-track approval to the project known as the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is financed in majority by a company called Energy Transfer Partners, which is based here in Texas, where I'm at, both in Dallas and in Houston. And they have basically, since the approval came, the Standing Rock Sioux, they sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers saying that they were not properly consulted. The pipeline runs within a few miles of the reservation. It's not technically on reservation land, at least not the land as it is now, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the pipeline is supposed to run under the Missouri River, and the Sioux, along with hundreds of scientists, historians, and activists out there, are worried about the impact on the Missouri River, and not just to the Sioux, but to the millions of people who depend on the Missouri River across the United States as a source of water, all the way down here to the Gulf of Mexico, all the different tributaries that connect to the river. There's a lot of fear of what will happen if that pipeline breaks, as they do tend to break, and we've even seen, since this fight's been going on, the Energy Transfer Partners has had some of their pipelines break. So it's a very real possibility. So the Sioux are fighting it under the grounds that, first, they say they were not properly consulted. Second, the pipeline is slated to run not only the Missouri River, but through sacred burial sites and grave sites that have been there for generations, and that the Sioux and other Native communities are sometimes the only ones who are aware of where these are at. I think what some people need to recognize is, in Native communities, not everything as far as traditions, grave sites, sacred sites, like petroglyphs or just different things like that, are known to the outside world. Sometimes those things are kept closely guarded within our communities, within Native communities, just like any community that is worried that outside forces might come and interfere and intervene there. So we have the fight over the spiritual, cultural reasons with the sacred sites and the burial sites, the fight for environmental reasons, concern about what will happen to the Missouri River. And there are also others fighting this pipeline, not the Standing Rock Sioux, but down in Iowa, where the pipeline is also running through. There are farmers out there who've been fighting it under eminent domain arguments, basically the government coming in and stealing the land. And as many people know, the government will come in and try to buy land from you until you give in. And eventually they're going to give you money and they're going to take your land whether you want to sell it or not. And that's what's happening down in Iowa. So you have these two resistance points. The rest of the pipeline has been all but completed, but the Standing Rock Sioux in Standing Rock, North Dakota, outside of Cannonball, North Dakota, the Sacred Stone Camp, and the farmers down in Iowa are the last 2 points that have been fighting the pipeline since April. But in August, when the construction actually began in North Dakota, that's when the Sacred Stone Spirit Camp really came to the national media's attention, or at least to the independent media's attention on a national level. And that was also when the first pepper spray and macing and the dog attacks started to happen as construction began. And the Sioux recognized that the courts were not going to help them, or they weren't interested, or that the lawsuit wasn't happening quick enough, and that the authorities weren't going to listen. Many of them decided, well, we're going to go ahead and put our bodies and our, on the gears of this machine and try to actually stop it. And so you had people doing direct action, chaining themselves to some of the machine, trying to stop that, or just literally putting their bodies in the way and getting pepper sprayed, getting attacked by dogs. And that's when it really started to come to everyone's attention. That's the first time I went to Standing Rock. I've been twice now. I went the last week of August to do some reporting, and really just had this beautiful experience seeing more tribes than any time in history coming together, both native nations, tribal nations in North America, not just Canada, the United States, but also down in Central America, coming to visit people from Norway, Indigenous supporters and allies from New Zealand, from Australia. This is the largest gathering and coalition and uniting of indigenous communities that we've ever seen, especially in the last 500 years since colonization. So it's a beautiful thing. It was very inspiring, and also as a journalist, this is a historic event that I want to be there to document. So I was there both as an ally, as the Sioux call themselves water protectors, as a water protector, and as a journalist who thinks that this is an important issue to cover. As I said, I went in August, and I just was able to go back I just got back in Houston about a week ago, and I went there for 7-8 days with about 8 to 10 people from Houston. Shout out to everybody who went out there from Houston. I very much appreciate you guys. And we were there for the second round of action. I was pepper sprayed. I was maced.
So we actually have some video. Maybe you can narrate while you're talking about that. We have some of your video. Maybe you can narrate for the people, because some of this does go out just as audio. Maybe while we're showing this, you can narrate what's going on. Christian, why don't you throw up that first video for us?
I'm with the press. Do not touch me.
So this is off Highway 1806. This is basically as they started to come to the frontline camp. You can see in the video, but if you're not watching, they start to bulldoze all the camp. They bulldoze a sweat lodge, which is a very sacred spiritual spot. They were just stealing everyone's property. I had my phone taken, and we're just looking at
camps have been destroyed over there.
This is happening on it's happening on the road. Then we have off to the side. So off to the side, this is the land in question, right? It's off to the side. There is the land that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's.
Yeah, exactly. We're at the site of the pipeline construction right now. This is where this video is from. And basically, this was 2 Thursdays ago when the police decided to come in and move the frontline camps. They came in, hundreds of officers, riot gear, mace, pepper spray, batons.
Yeah, they're totally suited up. It looks like there's some crazy military vehicles in the background.
This is where they try to grab me right here. Yeah,
somebody's trying to grab you.
Don't fucking touch me.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like to be grabbed.
You are when you talk about reporting from the front lines, you are literally you are there, and which is awesome. That
sound is the sound cannon for anybody who can hear that. That's the LRAD long range acoustic device. It's very disorienting.
So it's a crowd control device. We probably can't appreciate it on tape exactly how loud that thing is. I've been in the presence of one, and it really makes you want to run away from it. It hurts.
Absolutely.
It absolutely hurts.
And this is about the point where I get tased here. There's 4 or 5 officers pointing a taser at this horse and a man on the horse. And so I did what any good person would do, and I came up and told him to put it down. And in the process, I got shot
Boom,
at
there
and
it
I got
goes. You
tased.
are, even the camera goes blurry. I mean, that's
Yeah.
how,
It's
that's how,
crazy how that happened. I thought it was kind of interesting. The camera was basically matching my state of mind at the time. It was all chaotic. And I do want to say about that, I definitely was tased. I have, the scars to prove it. I got hit by at least 4 tasers. But in the video, when you slow it down and if you freeze frame the point whenever that you see that smoke come out,
Yes.
there's a guy, he's holding like a canister, and I think that's a beanbag round. It
Yes.
didn't hit me because I had no bruises on me, but he shot the beanbag round off, and it may have hit my camera, which is maybe why it went
Got it.
blurry. But when he shot that off, everything just became chaotic and everybody started running in different directions. So as I turned to walk away, because you can see when you freeze frame him shooting, all the guys with the tasers are still pointing at the horse. But
Right.
immediately after that, they turned towards me. And as I turned to walk away, I got hit like in my stomach and my chest on the side, my left
Oh my
side as I was
God.
turning away. And my legs locked up and I just dropped like a rock, And the only thing I could think was I threw my hand in the air. I was just like, somebody get me. Because everybody's running all over the place. And, I knew there was a horse there. And my friend Gabby and some other people just grabbed me by the hand and dragged me out. And I kept filming. The full report is on youtube.com/conscious resistance. It's about 12 minutes long. And you can hear in my voice, man, it really shook me up a bit because like I said, I'm there to document, but I'm also there in the video. You can hear people saying like, hey, we love you, we care about you. I keep
Right.
reminding you don't have to be the order follower. You can make a different decision. You don't have to do this. And they had a very robotic, zombie like
Well,
presence.
sure. I mean, they're police, right? The police are always zombies. That's part of the
And
process.
I try not to collectivize anyone, and even because this is the other thing is one of the ladies I did interview, when she got arrested, when she went to the jail, she actually witnessed 2 officers turning in their badges,
Well,
because
we actually have her. We have a little bit of her interview. You can talk about what she said after because
Sure.
we cut it before that, but we actually have a little bit of her interview. Why don't you
Go
go
ahead,
ahead
yeah.
and throw that
off
up?
and on since July.
Throw her sound up a little bit there, Christian.
And but yes, I got here last Friday night and came out right here, right behind us. We walked in solidarity across these fields and out to where they're putting down the pipes. DAPL security met us, and the police brutally and very forcefully used their force to stop us from walking.
You were part of the group of over 100 people that were arrested this past weekend?
Yes,
Okay.
I was. And, I've been to a lot of actions, and I've seen a lot of police officers stand for what they're standing. And this one was very intense. They definitely were using all of their force, and they arrested over 125 peaceful protectors. I can't even say we were doing anything other than just protecting the land by walking on it and praying while we were walking. This is where our ancestors are buried. This is very sacred land that we're on, and we were walking across it praying to stop this pipeline, this black snake from coming through.
Okay, so yeah, that's what we have of her. So there was more to the story though, and you were just starting to tell that. So like, if you could tell people what happened with her.
So that's that young lady there. She was arrested the weekend before actually the weekend I showed up. The day we showed up is when those arrests happened. Those 140 arrests. I got to talk with her, and she basically said while she was locked up. One interesting point, first of all, is when they arrest people there, they distribute them in all the surrounding counties. And I think it's for one, like these are local counties that never get this many arrests at the same time.
Okay.
But it's also part of their strategy to split everyone up. So they would send some people 2 or 3 hours away at some other jail, some people this way, and they divided people up as much as possible. But everyone that I talked to that was in the jails were trying to reach the officers, so that lady, Emily there, she's talking to the cop through there. She said she kept talking to this cop and he was actually engaging her. So she was like, all right, I'm gonna keep going as long as he'll listen, and was asking him, what do you stand for? I know what I stand for. I know why I'm here. I'm here to protect the water. I'm here to protect the land. What about you? What are you about? And I see in her words, she said she was able to reach him, and that he basically said, I think this is going to be my last shift because I didn't sign up to pepper spray peaceful people. I didn't sign up to attack you guys, and I drink water too, and I have to think about how this is going to affect my future and my children. So she said by the end of his shift, she watched him go turn in his badge and quit right there. And I interviewed several other people, not on camera, but others who confirmed that they had similar experiences. And it's been reported in the past couple of days. The stories are now making it out there. So, the reason I make that point is because Yes, I mean, I'm in the moment faced with these officers, and they're tasing me, they're pepper spraying me. So obviously, I don't think these guys are very friendly, and we're not on the same side. But I also don't want to make the mistake of collectivizing every single individual when there are still people out there who are capable of being unplugged from the matrix, so to speak, and shown a different way. And those officers, whether those agents of the government, those whoever they are that are currently opposing us and opposing those who want freedom and who want prosperity and health for the people on the planet. Those people, some of them may still be able to be reached. Maybe some people are beyond reproach at this point, but others can still be reached, and I'm going to continue to try to do that. I think that's an important point, that this movement has maintained itself as a prayerful, peaceful movement from the very beginning, and staying dedicated to that as the centerpiece of their activism. And I did see, in my report, you can see there's video of provocateurs showing up, and there was a couple times that elders did order and approve fire barricades being lit on fire to try to hold the police back. But it wasn't, just senseless, purposeless violence or destroying things like the provocateurs were doing. So for the most part, I mean, I wouldn't even call setting a fire a violent act when you're trying to stop and defend yourself. And if
so
I,
let's,
you know,
I mean,
go ahead.
I would like to examine it because this one is obviously, I'm an anarchist and practicing agorist before I even knew what the term was, right? But I've been an anarchist for a long time, and as I was saying earlier, I don't know if you caught it, but what drew me to libertarian ideals and the thing that is most important to me is the idea of self-ownership. From there, respect for obviously for life, for liberty, and for property, which is part and parcel of there's no freedom without private property. Right? If a person can't own something, then there's they can't be free. They can't even own their own thoughts. So for me, what I want to examine, and I hope that we can walk through this, since you've been on the ground, you know what people are saying there, you're well versed in this. For me, this was a very difficult one because obviously I don't want to see. I know enough of the history, and now going through this, I've learned a little bit more, but surely nowhere near enough to say that I have a comprehensive view of the Sioux people, the Dakota, and Nakota people. I do know that they've gotten a raw deal from the government. There's no question about that, from the U.S. government. I do know that the U.S. government has violated the treaties that they've had with them in the past. On this particular issue, this was a tough one for me because when the images came in, what I understood from it was that where the sort of police actions and where the private security actions were happening was on private land. And then hearing that perhaps this might not be private land, this might be treaty land, I want to show people we actually have what sort of an idea of where this land is. So there's the Sacred Stone Camp. We've got it down there. That's the Cannonball River, right? So you've got the Sacred Stone Camp, and then the Highway 134 and 1806 up there to the north, that confluence. So that's pretty much, is that the general area where your video is from, right?
Yeah, those are, I don't know if you can zoom in right there at 134 and 1806, but those two highways are where the two frontline camps were established. And you can see Sacred Stone is south of the Cannonball River, so that is technically, legally, according to the U.S. government, that is reservation land. Then north of the river, which is where the Ocheti camp, the Red Warrior camps are established, that is technically, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers land. So they've been.
Hold on. I'm going to stop you.
Sure.
Because I know that that's something that's been said, and I wanted to make sure of this before I went. One of the things that's most important to me on this show is that if I'm going to put out some information, like I need it to be accurate, right? So we actually have the overlay of the parcel map of this, of who the land belongs to. So
perfect.
So if you want it, so the yellow and the green is actually, that's completely privately owned land. So we've got this section 8, the yellow. There's a white strip running through that yellow. And if you go, Christian, if you go back out again, go back to toggle it again, just toggle. Just click on the map button again. So I guess that's basically in that there. So there's a tiny little corridor right there. But if you toggle back again, we've got that tiny corridor. But the pipe's not being built in that corridor, and that's not the place where the people were attacked is in the yellow.
Yeah, yeah. So we were, go back to just the map.
Yeah.
So off of where you can see 1806 and 134 connect, on 134 there was a frontline camp established because that was seen as a way, one of the entrances that the police were going to try to, come in that way. Further up north from where they intersect on 1806 is where the frontline camp was originally, and that's where the raid took place. And then a little bit south before 134 and 1806, that's where the construction, some of the construction was taking place. So it was a little bit further north than just that intersection.
So throw that up again. So basically, what we're talking about is we're talking about in the yellow.
In the yellow, closer along the border of 8 and 9, where that dotted line is. Like that's kind of where we were, the actual site of construction that they were attempting to keep the police, because they basically established two barricades. Several barricades, but at those two different points. And we're letting traffic in and out, but no police and no construction workers, employees of the pipeline were allowed through. And, we were just anticipating, and finally Thursday, the police came and they pushed off everybody off 1806 and 134 back to about, less than a mile north of Red Warrior Camp. And, the border was kind of established at a bridge there. The construction, though, that I videoed where the lady was standing is closer to the border of 8 and 9.
So here's the problem that I have, Christian, if you want to jump back to us. The problem that I have, so as I understand it, there's three issues with this, right? The first issue is that this is treaty land, right? So that that somehow this land that's listed in the parcel map as being owned by, at that time it was the Allens. And we did some digging back to find out the sort of ownership of this, that either it's invalidly owned. The second thing is that there are sacred burial sites, and that that's supposed to be consulted in order for there to be sacred burial sites. The first thing that I want to address is, as you had the young woman who you interviewed who said that they walked out to where the pipes were being dug, and that's where the police arrested people.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the map, I see that that's private property. They're going out onto private property. That's trespassing. I'm trying to understand. All right,
I'm ready for this. I was hoping to get into this.
Yeah, I'm trying. So for me, as if I want freedom, one of the most important things to me as an anarchist against the state is the sanctity of private property, because I don't want the state, without warrants, without all of these things, coming onto my property. I'm sure that if I was to go onto the Standing Rock Reservation and I was to go onto the private property of one of the tribe members, I'm sure that I'm not going to be greeted with open arms if they've asked me not to be there. I mean, having been up in that part of the country, I'm sure I'll probably be greeted with a shotgun. So I'm right? I'm trying to understand, how is this okay?
Let's dive into this then.
Let's, please.
Okay, so first, I think there's a couple points to remember is that not all anarchists respect private property, and we can debate whether or not they are anarchists in the eyes of. There's propertarians, there's non-propertarians, so there are those who definitely don't view property in the way that you and I probably do. And I will even say that my views on property are still developing, and that a lot of those thoughts are going to go into the final book in the Conscious Resistance trilogy, because I do see value and understand the importance of self-ownership and the importance of private property in some instances. But I also can think of several examples where I think it can be problematic, and that's a whole other conversation. Okay. But just wanted to establish that. And we're going to
have you back on for absolute sure on the show. I'd love for you to come back and talk, because I really enjoy your thoughts. So, okay, so yes, please, on this issue.
So now we got that out of the way, what I want to say is, for those who are propertarian anarchists or anarcho-capitalists or just right libertarians, whatever term, voluntarists, who believe in private property as one of the bases of a future stateless society. Many of you probably are fans of Rothbard or know Rothbard's work, and he talks about the homesteading principle and being able to, how would we make legitimate land claims without the state? Where would the land go to, like unowned land that's owned by the state, or how would we deal with land that has been misappropriated? And I think that's exactly what we're dealing with here. So the 1851 Laramie Treaty was signed by the Sioux and several other tribal nations, and if you look at the map from that treaty, they were the rightful, I guess, occupants of that land, the stewards of their land. The most Native communities, and this is sort of, I think, where my qualms come in, is from my background of learning Native traditions and learning in that way, and understanding that there's a much different view on property and from most of those instances. And I think that those are important areas to dissect when property can work. I really think a true stateless society will probably have some instances of private property, others, maybe developing unowned property or common property or whatever. It would be a true spontaneous order. It wouldn't be that everybody is going to have exactly the same thing. Obviously, there would be some need for basic understandings. But with this case, I think we're seeing, for one, people talk about the consultation of the tribe. I honestly don't even care about that aspect. If the tribe, so there's people saying, oh, look, they had plenty of opportunity to respond to the government's requests, and they ignore them. So people who've been abused and slaughtered and just attacked for 500 years are now supposed to comply with the government. Like, I don't think, and especially as an anarchist, I don't understand why any anarchist would respect anything that the U.S. government is trying to.
I'm not actually talking about the government, though. Like, in this case, I'm talking about a private individual who owns this land. What I'm asking is,
could not have acquired that land without the U.S. government dishonoring their treaties and taking the land from the Sioux.
Let's talk about that, because I was actually concerned that might be the issue. So let's look at, in terms of the Sioux themselves, their government, from standingrock.org, their website, what they say in terms of the treaty, their land, what is their land. Do we have the Laramie? So this is from standingrock.org. This is just a part I'd really advise people to go, and this is from the government of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. That Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, originally established, let me see, I could barely see it on my screen here, I've got it. As part of the Great Sioux Reservation, Article 2 of the Treaty of Fort Laramie of April 29th, 1868 describes the boundaries of the Great Sioux Reservation as commencing on the 46th parallel of north latitude, so 46 north to the east bank of the Missouri, south along the east bank to the Nebraska line, then west to the 104th parallel of west longitude. By the way, all the links to the things we're talking about are all included in the description of this if anybody wants to go and check it out. So also on that, the next line is, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe operates under a constitution approved on April 24th, 1959 by the Tribal Council of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe stands by its right to self-government as a sovereign nation, which includes taking a government-to-government stance with the states and the federal government entities, having signed treaties as equals with the United States government in 1851, and in 1868, which established the original boundaries of the Great Sioux Nation. The tribe staunchly asserts these treaty rights to remain steadfast and just as applicable today as they were on the day that they were made. So the thing about this, and the reason why this brought up some issues for me, is that the Sioux Nation themselves, I do understand that after 1868, the 1868 one was signed by the Standing Rock Sioux. That 1851 was actually signed by some other bands that were over to the east. It didn't include their land at all. So they didn't cede that land, obviously, in 1851. Agreed. In 1868, though, they put this together, and then after that, the U.S. government took a lot of fucking land from them. A lot of land. But it's all the land that they took was south of this 46th parallel. And then, so I wanted to know, I was like, okay, is this land south of 46 North? Because the Sioux themselves say that the 1868 treaty, where 46 North is the northern boundary, everything below that is our land. So went to the GPS, and even the Sacred Stone Camp is actually north of the boundaries that the Sioux themselves say that they agreed to. So this private land is, even by the Sioux's own admission, even by their own constitution and by the Treaty of Fort Laramie, is not within the treaty boundaries. So I'm trying to understand how they're coming to this.
That land was gifted by a supporter. The Sacred Stone Camp land?
No, I'm not talking about Sacred Stone. I'm talking about above that. Above that, if they're saying that that by treaty it's their land, the treaty itself says that it's out of the boundaries of their land.
So what I think that we're seeing here is basically, the standingrock.org represents probably maybe an official status of what that tribe represents. And I bet even within that, like you have the chair, he's been speaking out, Dave Archambault, he's been speaking a lot in favor of Sacred Stone. But I would imagine, just like many people, is that not everyone agrees on this. And even within the camp of Sacred Stone, there are some people who disagree with lighting the fires. There's some people who disagree with going and doing direct action. There's some people who just want to do prayer and peaceful movements. But the Sacred Stone camp and the Red Warrior, the people who are there, who are kind of, I would say at this point, a separate entity from just the Standing Rock Sioux Nation themselves.
So who do they think owns the land, and what is their? Because I'm assuming
from the camps, I've been hearing the 1851 treaty. Like I looked at the website, yeah, the Standing Rock Sioux says 1868, but from the camps, the press releases and things that have been going out in the statements reference the 1851 treaty. And there was Sioux that were involved in signing that treaty. And I think they're basically trying to say, like, we don't believe that basically that they were cornered into signing the 1868 treaty and then all the land that was taken after that. And so they're trying to harken back to saying, like, we are going to stand by the 1851 treaty and try to hold the U.S. to those agreements. And at the same, and this is another point that I want to make, because the property issue is a big thing for a lot of people, especially propertarians who are like, okay, I don't like seeing police militarization, but are they legitimately there, or are they invaders?
I mean, if the police are standing for the protection of an individual's private property, it's one of the rare, like, that's actually what I think anybody who's even like a minarchist, right? If anybody wants a state, one of the one thing that they're like, it's two things: settle disputes, right, and protect people's property. Those are like the two things that they want from the state. Everything else they don't want. So it's like, so when police are out there, and I guess that this is my question. What I want to know from the people in the camp, if this property does not belong to the people listed on the deed, if they're making that claim, who are they claiming that this property? So the Standing Rock Sioux Nation says it can't be their property because it's north of what they've agreed to by 1868. So it's not the property of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation. It's not the property of the people who have the deed. Whose property is it?
I think if we go back even further, and again, maybe some people say, well, hey, the natives lost the war against the U.S. government. They had, better military technology, so that's what happens in war. Some people lose, some people win. But others would argue that, this conquest doesn't give the U.S. legitimate means or right to any of the land, and so that it would go back, if we're talking about taking it back to like land titles and trying to trace it back to the whoever has a legitimate claim, that more than anyone the Sioux would probably have that claim, or at least the native peoples in that area. And I do want to also say that two other points that are, I think, difficult for people who are strictly thinking about it in terms of property to understand is, when I first went in August and when I came back this time, I realized that this movement and these actions and this fight is not just about oil, and it's not just about the pipeline, although that's what the focus is. It's actually a much bigger fight. And what I've sort of been terming it as a clashing of worldviews, where you have more of an indigenous native perspective that thinks about the seventh generation, thinks about how the actions today are going to affect not just the people coming after you, but the people after that, and after that, and after that, and after that, and on, and really trying to make decisions that live with that in mind. And then you have this other worldview, which we could maybe term like a Western or modern or materialistic worldview. And I feel like what is really unfolding is a clashing of these two worldviews that can no longer abide by each other, because this movement, this uniting of tribes, is not just going to go away whether this pipeline is built or not. And I think that's important to recognize too, because I also think that there could be an argument made in line with the non-aggression principle to make a legitimate claim to coming and defending life on this planet, whether that be animal life, human life, or just the earth itself. And it does get into some interesting and kind of sticky situations on trying to understand how it would play out. But I think that's more of what we're seeing here, is that we have a people who are connected to the earth and see themselves as defenders of the earth and as children of the earth. And so in line with that, they're doing what they believe they need to do in order to stop something that more than likely will cause destruction, whether or not it fits in with somebody's property arguments or not. They're saying that this is enough is enough. We need to come here. Like you see the sign, defend the sacred, water protectors. It's not just about the people down south are fighting it on eminent domain
Right.
reasons.
I mean,
And I think
those
that
are property rights, right? So
exactly. So,
I mean,
and I think that the Sioux can understand those claims. Obviously, they know that there's value in fighting for that. But I don't think it's just a fight about that. It's about stopping the pipeline. Some of them by any means necessary. Others by just trying to be prayerful and peaceful and spreading awareness and doing what they've taught. Like this week, there's going to be a march to the police station to go pray for the police and ask them for forgiveness and trying to get them to come out and talk to the people. So that's like how this movement is trying to move forward. And for those who may not be fully aware or understanding of Native spirituality, this is also a spiritual fight. It's also a cultural fight. And I know that's probably hard for some people to understand, but that's being this close to the earth and feeling connected to all life, not just the Native people, but allies of all types. That's what they see this fight as being more about, not just stopping this one pipeline, but also this is, I think, probably a resurgence of the Red Power movement that we saw in the 1960s and 70s. Because really a lot of people don't know that up until the 60s, Native people weren't allowed to grow our hair long. We weren't allowed to practice our traditions and sing our songs. And, there's the whole history of boarding camps. So really this last 50, 60, 70 years is like an awakening of how do we bring back that spirit. And that's what I'm seeing out there. When I'm walking around and talking to the people, it's not just about stopping that pipeline. They're talking about like, what are we going to do after this? How are we going to keep this momentum going, this movement going? And about being able to oppose other projects and other pipelines and other things that are damaging to the earth.
Well, I wanna before we get too off on other projects, I want to address two things. One, I want to address your spirituality issue. I obviously, as anyone who believes in human rights, everyone has to have a right to practice their spiritual practices, to engage in any and all of those things which further them as an individual in their own conscious evolution, until the point at which, as I often say, that it's the idea of self-ownership, the entire idea. And I think that the idea of what has happened to Native peoples, as you said, about not being able to grow your hair long, right, is that my rights end where your rights begin, right? So my rights, I don't have a right to tell you not to grow your hair long, but you don't have a right to tell me what I can do on my property unless and until it hurts you. Like, you can't make a claim on the earth any more than I have a claim on what should happen on the earth, particularly if that earth is under my feet. But I do want to address this because in terms of this land, as I went and looked, I learned, like I said, doing this, I actually learned a little bit of Sioux history. I don't know if the people there at the camp are talking about this particular land. So this land the land in question is known as the Cannonball Ranch, and it's very famous in that area. It's actually in the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and it has an interesting story. So this is from the Cowboy Hall of Fame. R.M. Johnson, one of the first white settlers along the Cannonball River, started the ranch in the 1860s. Then Henry S. Parkin purchased it and the surrounding several thousand acres in 1883 and ran 700 head of cattle in the area. Now, what's interesting about Henry, he was a justice of the peace, a county commissioner, a member of the first territorial legislature, and a state senator. He was also married to a woman named Alma Galpin, who was an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And they were married at the time when he bought this property. Her mother, as I went back to look at this, who, by the way, died in the ranch house on this property, was a woman named Eagle Woman, who all look at, Matilda Peacoat Galpin.
Yeah.
And she was actually the only female Sioux chief.
Yeah.
She was the only woman to ever sign a treaty with the United States. She was known for being a peacemaker. It was actually her daughter's land. After she died, this daughter of hers, Alma, who I believe we have a picture of Alma, she owned the land outright. So it was owned outright by a member of this exact Standing Rock Sioux Nation. She owned the land herself outright until she died, When she died, she gave it to her sister, Louise Van Solen, who was also an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. Very well known. She was actually known because she was the first school teacher on the reservation, and there's actually a town, Solon, named after her. And then when she died, she gave it to her daughter, Lucille, who was also an enrolled member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, whose name means rose light of dawn. Lyso Ahina Pewen. So what I'm trying to get at, then she sold it to John F. Sullivan Jr., whose family owned the ranch for 65 years. And then Monty and Nancy Allen, whose names are on the map that we saw, bought it. And they developed a buffalo herd. And those are the buffaloes there. What I'm trying to understand is this. What I see when I look back at the history of this property is I see 3 enrolled members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe who own this property, who then legally sold it off, and now it's actually gone. Funny that you mentioned 7 generations. This land has now passed through, from that first group, 7 generations of owning this land. 3 of those generations were enrolled members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, the descendant of one of the most famous. She's in North Dakota Hall of Fame, South Dakota Hall of Fame, Eagle Woman. She's one of the most famous female native peoples of the Americas. I'm trying to understand, are these people at the camp saying that these 3 very famous women, enrolled members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, are they trying to say that they didn't have the right to the land and they didn't have the right to sell the land?
They might be arguing that without realizing it. I'm not sure as far as that. I do know that it was their grave sites that were desecrated last week when everybody was pepper sprayed.
Okay, so I hold on. I want to talk about that too, right? Again, I want to make sure that everything is clear, right?
Of course.
So actually, can you click on that burial? This was sent from the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer about this situation, saying that the Cannonball Ranch is a crossing point for the Dakota Access Pipeline. The Cannonball Ranch is eligible for inclusion into the National Registry of Historic Places. There are 6 burials of notable residents, as you said, of Standing Rock, including the Galpins and Mrs. Van Solen, located here. So I know that this is what's being said about what's on that land. And again, all of the links are in the description on this. People can go and check this out for themselves. When I went to look, though, if you go, Christian, the graves, see, they were buried there. Go to the next one, please, Christian. But when they built the dam, all of these people, as you see there, she's now reinterred at St. Peter's Church. They were moved when the dam was built. They were moved from the Cannonball Ranch Cemetery. So the thing is, like, if you look, and you can go and click on the links of all of these people, we know where they're all buried, and they're all buried at Fort Yates, which is several miles to the south. So they're no longer buried on that land. Although this is the narrative that's being said, that these people's graves are being disturbed, but they were already dug up and reburied at Fort Yates Cemetery. So I'm trying to understand this.
Yeah, this is all listed on the Sacred Stone Camp website, sacredstonecamp.org, and their statement from last week, they acknowledge this. And again, I think that for the traditions there, it's not necessarily that where the body is at all, but it's that area, that they live there, that they were originally buried there, and that land itself is seen as sacred to the Sioux. And again, like, I know this is where it clashes with a strictly rational, strictly logical worldview that is only thinking in terms of property claims or what it can be proven by documents and paperwork, whereas with Native spirituality, it doesn't end there, basically. So the Sioux believe that entire area, and not only the Sioux, but others who have come from other places, who have had battles there in the past and things like that, to them, that makes it a sacred site. And I know that kind of makes it difficult because there's tons of other battles, right? Anybody could come along and say, "Hey, well, my grandparents were buried here at one point several hundred years ago."
My question to you then becomes this: because I want to be egalitarian, if I'm going to allow, like you say, if I'm going to allow for that idea with the Sioux, can I also go back to, like, I mean, my grandfather fought in the Mexican Revolution. Can I go along, and if they want to do something in any of the places where he fought, my great great grandfather fought in the Haitian Revolution. Can I go back to Haiti and stop someone from building on land because my grandfather fought there? My grandfather was in the Tuskegee Airmen. Can I go, over to over to somewhere in Europe and say he flew over this and an airman was shot down here? Like, I'm trying to understand, where does it stop, or is this something only indigenous people get, or do we all get it?
I think that you're going to have a differing viewpoints, and some would argue, yes, that indigenous people, or wherever you're indigenous from, like you mentioned, the Mexican-American War, well, some would say, then go home, go back to where you're from, not like leave the country, but go find those roots and connect to, your sacred sites and connect to.
I mean, I don't have a problem with the connection. That's not what I'm saying. Do I have a right to set up a camp uninvited on somebody's private land? Because does somebody can they come to my house? I bought the house, I didn't know, but can they come and say, with no documentation? Because, by the way, all the documentation says so far that there are no sites. It's oral tradition, I understand. There's a greater spiritual idea, but again, isn't that the same thing that the Zionists say about why they had a right to kick the Palestinians out of land that the Palestinians were in? Because in their oral tradition and in their religious tradition, this was the land that belonged to the Jews. Like, is that okay? I'm just trying to understand.
No, I get where you're going, and I think that you're asking good questions. This is why I was saying, like, my views on property are somewhere in the middle and not necessarily one way or the other, because I can see, like, extrapolating the problem, how it can get more and more difficult. But I think the problem is that you're only thinking of it in terms of private property, and that many people don't base their ethics on private property.
I agree, which is a problem.
And it may be a problem in some instances, but again, I do think that a legitimate claim using the non-aggression principle and perfectly in line with libertarian values could be made. Like, for instance, I've told a friend, I would kill a human being to stop them from killing an animal. If they were just literally, not, for their food or something, but if I witness somebody, and I don't care if you're on your side of the fence or not, if I witness you abusing another life, like senselessly, a person, animal, whatever, I will intervene. And under private property claims, I would be the invader, and thereby it would be just if I was.
Well, no, I actually don't think that's true. I think if somebody
some people do make that claim. Some would say, "Hey, it's my land."
Let's take the. I do like this conversation because I think that it does get to the root of a lot of things. That's why I was excited about this show, because it really is dealing with a lot of the issues. And these are all questions that we have to ask, right? As we move forward in this movement.
We try to get to a stateless society.
Exactly. These are the important things. These are the who will build the roads, right? And so which I want to get to, because this to me has who will build the roads in it, right? Because the things that people ask are, they're like, well, who will build the roads, right? Who will provide the power, the water system, all of these? What's going on with this Dakota Access Pipeline is, the part that they did with the government is only where it goes underneath the rivers and tributaries. All the rest, and in North Dakota, Dakota Access Pipeline went to private property owners and got 97% of the land that they're using to move this pipeline is private land that they've either bought or they've got leases on to put a pipeline. And a pipeline is fundamentally, it's a road, because if they don't have the pipeline, they're either using a railroad or they're using the actual roads to move the oil from one place to the next. So the question of who will build the roads, and here we have a private road being built completely outside of the government, completely by a private entity, doing it in the way that as would have to be done in a stateless society if the state's not building it. It's difficult for me to support somebody who's trying to stop that from happening.
Sure. Well, I would argue as well that this company and most of the oil industry would not be able to do the projects they have or to maintain the monopoly that they've had without the state. So that's another reason that anti-statists should fight
but
this.
Not on this project. Overall, for sure. But this particular project is one, and it's one of the reasons why the Army Corps of Engineers, I mean, throw up the U.S. Army. This is from the Army Corps of Engineers back to the Sioux. Basically, what they say here is that their permitting process. This was for the Historical Preservation Act. This is them initiating the consultation. This was in February, and they said please note that the Corps is neither funding nor constructing the proposed pipeline and would have permitting authority over only a very small percentage of the overall 1,100-mile pipeline project. The majority of the work and associated with construction of the pipeline will occur in uplands and not waters, then navigable waters. And then what they basically say is that this is the only government agency that's dealing with this, the federal government agency, besides, obviously the permitting of by the states, public utility commissions, and all of that. But this is the only agency that's dealing with this. I mean, I know a few people in the oil industry who I think those particular people are good people. They fortunately deal in some areas that are not really in question about the ethics of it, but they hate the government.
Yeah.
As most businesses hate the government.
People can hate the government and still take subsidies, and still benefit.
But the thing
from
is, this project is not being subsidized by the government. It's not being.
No, I'm not saying this project even specifically. I'm talking about the fact that we have an oligarchy that maintains a monopoly. That there are no other options outside of oil, so people have to either support pipelines like this. And the Sioux are trying to say that we have other options, that not just this company, but the oil industry in general work together, and this is my main argument, that they work together with the state to maintain that monopoly. And if that monopoly didn't exist, then other projects, which the Sioux might be more supportive, which more people might be in support of, would be possible. And if the oil industry hadn't been propped up to this point, then energy transfer partners might not exist. And also, if the banks who are funding this pipeline, who also are part of the same status system, same Federal Reserve banking system, if those banks weren't allowed to be propped up the way they are, too big to fail, they wouldn't have the funds to lend out to energy transfer partners. So this whole project would not be allowed to exist without statism in one form or another.
I certainly agree. I think that there are a lot of issues tied up in this.
It's definitely a complex issue.
Yeah, it is very complex. I'm so glad that you were able to come on and give the view of the people who are out there basically putting their bodies on the line. I know that everybody in this situation, as I always say, I mean, there are some psychopaths out there. I don't think there are very many, but the vast majority of people are doing really what they think is right. And, for me, I want to get the maximum amount of information, share it with people. So I'm glad that you came on. I really would like you to come back on and talk about the things that you're doing in Houston. I know that we didn't get a chance to get to that this time, but to talk about the things you're doing with the Houston Free Thinkers, to talk about the things that you're doing with your agorist projects. So I hope that you come back on. We'll be following you. Are you planning on going back up there to
I'll probably be going. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity, man. I'd love to come back. I probably will be going back in early December if there's still a need. If it's still ongoing and there's still a need, I plan to go back. And I just want to throw this out, one more thing to you, and you can chew on this and we can talk later.
Please.
And the listeners, anybody who believes in property, I just want to ask, at what point do we make a decision to say that a certain project or an action is going to affect the future of this planet and our health, and decide that that's more important than a property claim? Or how do we adjust the property ethic to work and take that into consideration? That's what I'm developing. That's what I'm working on for my last book. How can propertarians and non-propertarians coexist, and how can we create something that allows all life to flourish and not just somebody to die or the planet to die based on private property? That's all.
I like it, and I hope that you come back on to promote your book as soon as you're done. We would love to have you back on and talk about it. Very interesting conversation. Derrick Broze, thank you so much for coming on. We'll definitely have you again, and let us know if you head back up so that we can be sure to follow up on your reporting from Standing Rock. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
So, very, very cool, man. Christian. Very cool.
Wow.
A lot of info.
A lot of info.
The thing that strikes me is how much deeper you're always forced to look, and the questions that arise.
Yeah.
The more facts that you have.
Yep.
Right. I think that in any narrative, right, in any narrative and any action that you're taking, when you take a side, when you decide to take a side, you have to have a narrative that drives you. So in some ways you have to stop obtaining information and you have to start acting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's why we have, a judicial branch and then we have an executive branch. It's not the executive branch's job to make the judgment, right? And it's not the judicial branch's job to execute. Now, I'm not all for the state, but I think that that's a pretty good concept.
Right.
Right? A lot of information. I mean, for me, I have to. I have a very difficult time. And look, we all come at things from our own perspective.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Myself, as an atheist, and as someone who is all about self-ownership, and as someone who tries to put myself in everyone's situation, how I always judge things is consistency. Right? If I have to ask, is this okay for one person but not okay for the other person? I already know that there's a problem there, right? A sort of logical and ethical consistency tends to make things a little easier. It's kind of like, you don't fuck with me and I won't fuck with you, and everybody, you know what I mean? And you know what? Sometimes aesthetically, it's like, you don't tell me what color to paint my house. I won't tell you what color to paint your house. May well end up that you've got a hot pink and purple house next door to you. But what you give up in terms of you don't like the aesthetic, right? What you gain in terms of the freedom to express yourself.
Yep.
That's where you gotta weigh it, right?
It's very interesting, especially hearing, what's going on down there and really diving deep and looking at it and comparing it to what's going on with the election and
Right.
things of that nature. So the way I kind of broke it down is you have different levels of consciousness, right? And what we're going through right now, especially within this election, is the beginning of the awakening.
I agree. I 100% agree. This is all a part of it.
And I think that's exactly what they're going through as well.
Right.
It's the beginning of the awakening. It is not the embodiment or the enlightenment stage yet.
Right.
So what we do is we realize, okay, the beginning of the awakening is resistance. And that brings the knowledge that we need to go into the embodiment or the enlightenment, which is do not participate.
Right. Right. Well, one thing as I looked through this that I found very interesting. Now, my background, spending the last 6 years being on reality TV, that was the greatest education I ever had into propaganda. That's when I started studying, what is this propaganda? Because I saw, okay, here's a bunch of people filming me. And then I saw shows edited down and I saw narratives created and all of these things. And it's like, yes, it happened, but this is a crafted story. It's funny because Peter Kallman, who was our guest last week, actually hit me up and he was like, dude, I watched the first episode of your TV show. You have an origin story, like an origin myth. And I was like, wow, that's funny that I could just walk through my day and then and it's an origin myth that happens when I'm like 30 years old at the time when that's not my origin myth, you know what I'm saying? But it becomes that because millions of people have seen. What I found interesting as I looked at this is, and in terms of the narrative, and Derrick shared with us the narrative that is there at the camp, that is sort of the pervading narrative. I was really interested, where is this narrative coming from? Because it sounded very well crafted. Right, so I went through the news press releases, and you can go on standwithstandingrock.org, and interestingly, ran across, since we're talking about Illuminati, right? And I thought this is an interesting Illuminati Enlightenment tie-in. The PR firm. So the Standing Rock Sioux have hired a PR firm. This is them. This is Pyramid Communications. I'm not fucking with you right now. This is Pyramid Communications, a force for good. They are specifically focused around indigenous rights issues like stopping pipelines, stopping oil drilling, setting up these sorts of things, if you go to their website, pyramidcommunications.com, you will see them talking about social justice, all of these causes, and I don't know if this is the right term for it, but Indian country is one of their main things that they focus on. Not exactly the most diverse group. This is only a portion of their staff. It doesn't get much more diverse as you go and check out their staff bios either. Although they do have one native Alaskan gentleman who handles who's the project manager for all of their projects in quote unquote Indian country, as their words, not mine. This is them holding up. They're very proud of their B Corporation status. They're very proud of their corporate status. Then I went onto their blog. So here we go. You can go on there as well. We've got the link. This is their No DAPL, 3 media tips for sticking to the message. One of the things that I found interesting about this was because the juxtaposition. So here are the people standing with Standing Rock and protesting. And then, can we show the staff again? There's the staff. So these are the people crafting the message. And then these are the people following the message that those people have crafted.
Wow.
Now, what a lot of people don't know about public relations, the father of public relations is a gentleman named Edward Bernays. I would definitely suggest it's Bernays. He is known as the father of public relations. He started the industry. He also had some campaigns that were quite amazing. His very first book was a book called Propaganda. And that was initially what public relations was. He wrote that in the 1920s, and then he actually stopped calling it propaganda and started calling it PR, public relations, as a public relations move because propaganda had gotten such a bad rap in World War II because of people like Goebbels and whatnot who were using these techniques of Bernays. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Wow, yeah.
So Bernays also, if you go and read his books about PR, if you go and read propaganda, his basic thesis was that if we're in a democracy, people cannot be trusted to choose for themselves. So people must choose for them. But since it's a democracy, you're going to have to convince them to think in a certain way. And you do that through control of a message.
Propaganda.
No, it's not propaganda. It's public relations.
Ah, that's right.
PR. So let's go back to the blog. So these guys are bragging about how they have done their propaganda for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. Do we have some of the text of that? Got a little bit? No text? I think I might have some of it here. Let's see. Basically, they're really not there. Interesting.
There, yeah.
Well, you can go to it. I've put a link in the description, but it's basically they view this as their message, their target audience is Washington, D.C. They're wanting the government to step in and to stop what's happening. And so they've specifically targeted Washington, D.C. And all of what's happening is being essentially orchestrated as a message. They've stepped in, they've gotten the celebrity endorsements, they've gotten all of this. Now, the part for me that is bothersome about this as an anarchist is when you ask, and it goes back to all of the things that we have talked about earlier, from
the beginning.
The health issue, right? The climate issue, protecting certain groups of people. When you ask the state to do this and you hand over power to the state, you increase the power of the state. It's then difficult to be angry when the state executes the power that they have, because the state wants that power. And in our democracy, they can only have it if you give it to them, which goes straight into these elections and goes straight into what we were talking about, absolute power corrupting, absolutely. What I find interesting about this, with this messaging that's gone on. Just 2 days ago, $2.5 million was donated to bail out the people who had been arrested in these protests.
Anonymous, right?
An anonymous donor, right? But we've had celebrities go there, right? Bernie Sanders spoke there. Jill Stein vandalized some shit on private property. Very good. Exactly what you want from a president, right? Somebody who really loves to, a vandal who doesn't respect private property is probably not who you want to vote for as a president, no matter what the cause is, right? Mark Ruffalo went and donated all of these solar panels. But I found that 2.5, I think it was yesterday actually, the $2.5 million donation. It's reported on Activist Post as well. Activistpost.com was actually where I got the information. Anonymous donor donated $2.5 million to get these people out of jail. Now, the funny part about this is, you see, when you take the state out of everything, when you want to control what happens on land, on some piece of land, and there's no state, and you think, there's no state. I can't make the police do something. I can't make the government do something. And I want to control what's happening on this piece of land. What's the first option that you would think, Christian?
Buy the land.
Buy the land. Now, the funny thing about this particular land, you see, this land, people have been trying to get rid of it for years. The last 10 years, people have been trying to sell off this fucking land. And so I actually went, when I was looking at Cannonball Ranch, if you go and Google Cannonball Ranch, one of the first things that shows up is an older property sale. And I believe we have it. It's from landofdakota.com. It's a land sale. So as you can see, the entire ranch was for sale for $5 million, or the west unit, which is that yellow, that's in question, was for sale for $2.5 million, 2.6. Wow. So basically what I'm hearing is this, that up until just a couple of years ago, the same amount of money that's being spent to bail people out of jail could have been spent to simply buy the land. And even sooner than that. Because look, when DAPL recently bought it, Dakota Access Pipeline recently bought it. I think we've got it sold to DAPL. Do we have that?
Yeah.
So this is just September 23rd. So there had been protests. There had been people arrested. There had been people beaten up, all because asking the state to do something. As opposed to saying, hey, we're going to go meet with these ranchers and just fucking buy the land. Everybody, don't come out, don't protest, don't do this. Just contribute.
Yep.
And if you think people don't contribute, let's check out the GoFundMe. So there's $1.5 million that's been donated to Standing Rock officially on their GoFundMe. And then here's just people going out to Standing Rock. 20,000 raised, 91,000 raised, 9,000 raised, 15,000 raised, 8,000 raised, 10,000 raised, blah, blah. And this is number 1 through 10 of thousands. There are thousands of people. Most of these people are raising money just so that they can have food and gas and clothing and take some food out to the protesters. This is how much money is wasted. This is how much time is wasted when you ask the state to solve your problems. Because all of this money, if people really gave a fuck, if people really cared, you can get off it now. If people really cared, Christian, they would have donated that. I would have donated. You know what? I would have donated to them buying the land as opposed to donating to them trespassing on land.
Yeah, and resisting.
Because as we were talking about before, when you take the state, when you take these mythologies out of your idea of how to solve problems, you're only limited by your imagination.
Yep. The question is,
Please.
how? How do you do it? And that's what I was thinking about last night with the whole election thing going
Yes.
on. And I had a really good conversation with my parents, and they're very much resistance mindset right now towards this whole thing, and I was too. And I started to see, as we're talking about this,
Yeah.
I started really going deeper and thinking about it. The way that you do it is by taking the control back, realizing that you have
go.
control over yourself, and you do not participate in the shenanigans.
You are going to absolutely love our guest for next week. So this week we got into some great stuff. As I said, there are several technologies that I really, really love. Thank you, Christian.
Yes, absolutely.
There are several technologies that I really, really love. And next week we have some guys from Stack, which is a blockchain company, and they've put together a wonderful technology. We're going to get into the blockchain. We're going to get into cryptocurrency. As I said, it's one of the technologies that I absolutely adore, and I think that it's one of the keys to freedom, and it's how we're going to do it. So I'm looking at the time. That's it for our show today. Wow. I really had a great time. So many big issues. I hope that you enjoyed it as well, and I hope that you will visit some of the links, check out for yourself, examine. Good luck with this election. But again, the information is out there. Get out there, get it, because you own yourself, you own your mind, and freedom is a mindset. Thank you for watching. You can check out the archive. It'll be on youtube.com/Vin Armani. This will archive onto Activist Post Facebook. It'll be up on Twitter and, on iTunes and Stitcher as a podcast. And we will see you again next Monday at 10 a.m. Christian, I, and our great guests, thank you for watching. See you next time.